everybody, and welcome back to the Tackle Talk Network. If you saw last week's episode, thank you. You're awesome. You're fantastic. I got a total of 4 whopping views. I mean, that's not bad, I don't think, for a first episode, really. I didn't think I was going to get any views. But let's get on with the NFL. This wild card weekend was insane. Most of them were blowouts. Some of them we didn't even expect. Tides returned a little bit. And we even got a really close game. So let's hop into it. First off, last week, I went a very respectable 5-1 on my predictions. I got almost every single game right, even on the scoring prediction side of things. I believe there's one game I actually nailed on the head with a hammer, if I might say. There was also one game I was completely wrong on, and I think most of the NFL and the United States were also completely wrong on. So let's just jump into it. And the first game that I actually got wrong, because basically in this episode we're going to go over a couple things. First off, I'm going to go over and recap the wildcard games. Then I'm going to give you my power rankings for the divisional round. Then I'm going to go through and look at some of the coaching changes that have happened throughout the NFL, along with some staff moves and maybe some potential hires that might happen or have already happened with coaching. And then, last but not least, to end out this episode, I'll be going over the divisional round matchups and my predictions for said matchups. And we're going to have some spicy things today. Later on this episode, I will be predicting the Bills and Ravens game, but we'll get onto that later. We all know who's probably going to win those other games, but let's hop into it. First game of the wild card, we had the Los Angeles Chargers against the Houston Texans, and a lot of people thought this game was either going to be ultra close or that the Chargers were going to win in a blowout. Well, let me tell you, my friends, it was completely opposite. Let's jump into the stats here. First off, the score. Texans 32, Chargers 12. The Chargers started things out pretty decently on offense. The Chargers came out and scored 6 points. They should have had 2 touchdowns, but they just couldn't get their offense quite in the loop. And then when Houston finally got their offense going, they never looked back, by golly. In the second quarter, they put up 10 points, same in the third quarter. And in the fourth quarter, the Chargers put up a touchdown, but their PAT was blocked and returned for an extra 2 points for the Texans, giving them 12 points in the fourth quarter. So the Texans went on 3 quarters, scoring 10 points in each quarter, and if you add the 2-point conversion on the end, you got your 32-12 score. Now the Chargers, stat-wise, Justin Herbert, 14 for 32, 242 passing yards isn't really that bad, right? 1 passing touchdown, I mean, he looks good. He only got sacked 4 times. The thing that really killed this Chargers team, 4 interceptions. Yeah, Justin Herbert had 4 interceptions, more interceptions than he did all regular season. That's probably the most mind-blowing stat from this entire game. J.K. Dobbins led the team, not the Raiders. What am I saying? The Raiders aren't even in the playoffs. The Chargers. He led the Chargers in rushing with 9 carries and 26 yards. Not very good. Gus Edwards, 7 carries, 22 yards. Both of their longest runs were 8 yards. And actually, the third longest was Hassan Haskins, believe it or not, with 1 carry for 5 yards. This Chargers team, I really think if they would have kept a close game, they would have been able to run the ball more and even more efficiently. But dang, after that first quarter, they couldn't do anything, especially on offense. Now, something I do want to point out for this Chargers team, they had Ladd McConkey go absolutely nuts. And yeah, that 89-yard touchdown pass in the middle of this, I don't remember what quarter it was, the fourth quarter, that's right. Right towards the end of the game, really did help his stat line, but goodness, 9 catches, 197 yards, and a touchdown, but 14 targets. That led both teams in receiving targets, and that also breaks the NFL record that was set by Puka Nacua last year for most receiving yards and receptions caught by a rookie receiver in the postseason. That's utterly disgusting because the very next receiver for the Chargers was Will Dissly. 2 receptions for 19 yards. Yeah, basically, the Chargers were on life support the entire game, basically wanting Ladd McConkey to carry this team to a win, and obviously did not happen. And yes, Darius Davis did have a fumble in this game. And the Chargers defense, I mean, Doreen Haley or Henley, however you say his name, led the game in tackles for the Chargers. The Chargers, they had a lot of decent things on defense. Derwin James Jr., he should have had a pick. He didn't. He did have a good tackle for loss. Now, let's just go look on the chart. Not the Chargers. We just went over the Chargers. Come on, Graham. Let's go look at the Houston Texans side of things. CJ Stroud having a pretty good game himself, 22 for 33, 282 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was also sacked 3 times, one less than Herbert. On the running sides of things, Joe Mixon got it done. Unlike the Chargers running backs, Joe Mixon, 25 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. His longest rush only being 17 yards. But CJ Stroud, 6 carries, 42 yards. His longest was 27, and that breaks his rushing record for his longest run by, I believe, 2 yards. It was 3 yards. 24 was his previous record, I believe. Dameon Pierce also snuck in a couple carries there for 15 yards, and so did Dare, and I'm not even going to dare to say number 33's last name. He also got 1 carry. On the receiving side of things, it was all Nico Collins. Just like on the Chargers side of things, they depended on Nico Collins through the passing game with 7 receptions, 122 yards, and a touchdown. His longest catch was 41 yards on a post route. He was also targeted 8 times, so he only dropped 1 pass. I don't think he actually dropped it, but Xavier Hutchinson was coming up next for Houston. He only had 1 catch, but for 34 yards in this game. Cade Stover also getting 4 catches. Decent target for CJ Stroud in this game, 28 yards. He caught all of his balls that day. Unlike John Mechie, who went 50% on the day with 28 yards, only having 4 catches, was targeted 8 times. Joe Mixon also had a reception for 13 yards. And yes, Joe Mixon and John Mechie both had fumbles, as well as CJ Stroud also had a fumble in this game. So they were also not without their turnovers. They had 2 turnovers, I believe, in this game. It was something like that. CJ Stroud did fumble the ball, like I previously mentioned, but they did recover that fumble. On the defensive side of things, Will Anderson Jr. got 3 tackles and 1.5 sacks and a TFL. I think it was on the same play, but Mario Edwards Jr. also had 2 tackles and 1 solo tackle. It was also a TFL, and he had 1.5 sacks. Also, Denico Autry had a sack. And this was just a really good game for the Houston defense. I mean, come on, guys. They had so many interceptions. Derek Stingley had 2 of them and had 70 return yards, but Eric Murray had that 1 interception, and it got taken back to the house. Pick 6 for the Texans in this game. Overall, a really, really solid game for the Texans. They just came and showed up and showed out. A lot of us didn't think they had it in them, and now they go on next week and they play the Chiefs, but we'll get on to that in a little bit. Next, we head on to our second game, and by the way, that first game I predicted way wrong. I thought the Chargers were going to come out, run all over this Texans team. It did not happen, not even close. All right, next game, which I predicted to a T, Ravens Steelers. The Ravens got it done, 28-14. I am really kind of concerned about that Ravens defense, but in my opinion, I do kind of think that they were just kind of feeling bad for the Steelers. All the Steelers' points came in the third quarter, 2 passing touchdowns from Russell Wilson. The Ravens, oh my gosh. I mean, you look at this, and I'll get to the Ravens here in a second, because I want to cover the losing teams, or the away teams, most of the teams this week. Their stats first. So let's go over Russell Wilson. 20 for 29, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did not throw any interceptions. He was sacked 4 times as well. On the rushing side of things for Pittsburgh, Najee Harris led the room with 6 carries and 17 yards. Yeah, you heard that right. The Steelers could not do a thing against this Baltimore rushing defense. Not even close. Now, Pittsburgh receiving, on the receiving side, George Pickens led the room with 5 catches on 5 targets. That's the first time this year he actually caught all of his balls. 87 yards and a touchdown, his longest catch coming in the second quarter with a 36-yard reception. pretty good all around. Najee Harris, 3 receptions and 41 yards, was right behind him with his longest, 23, and him also catching all of his passes. Van Jefferson came in next with 2 catches and 37 yards for the Steelers, also catching both of his targets, and one of them coming on one play in the third quarter on one of their long sustaining drives for that touchdown. Now, as we move on down the Pittsburgh's defense, somebody that really did not show up at all this game was, in fact, TJ Watt. He was not even on the board for tackles of any sort. Now, this team also didn't get any interceptions. I wonder why. It's because the Ravens did not throw the ball that much. In fact, there was no interceptions in this entire game. Matter of fact, I don't even know if there's any turnovers in this game. Yeah, there was no turnovers in this entire game. I do not believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but anyways, this Steelers defense led the room in tackles. Elandon Roberts, I don't know if I said that right, number 50 for the Steelers, 14 total tackles, 7 solo tackles. Patrick Queen was next with 10 total tackles and 4 solo tackles and 1 TFL. Cameron Hayward also came in a respectable third place with as well as 10 total tackles, 3 solo tackles, and 2 TFLs. Now, if we look at the Ravens side of things, the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, first off in the passing game, went 16 for 21, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He only took 1 sack in the entire game. 1 sack. Now, you might be thinking, how on earth did they manage to put up 28 points with 2 passing touchdowns and 175 yards through the air? That's kind of crazy. However, their rushing attack was insane. They set a playoff record, especially against the Steelers, for most rushing yards allowed in a single game. How do you do that, Pittsburgh? I mean, I said that they weren't probably a playoff caliber team last week. They were running out of steam, and I was clearly right because that front 7 got absolutely annihilated. I did say that if Baltimore got the rushing attack going, they were going to destroy the Steelers, and that is in fact what they did. With Derrick Henry at the helm, 26 carries, 186 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he even had a 44-yard run to cap that off. But that's just the whipped cream. The cherry on top is Lamar Jackson, 15 carries, 82 yards. His longest rush tonight was 20 yards. And you had guys like Steven Sims and Justice Hill also get some carries in there as well. Funny enough, Justice Hill had 6 carries, Steven Sims had 1 carry, and he still had more yards than Justice Hill. And Mark Andrews, for some unknown godly reason, had 2 carries for 5 yards. I don't think I've seen Mark Andrews carry the ball before, but this Baltimore rushing attack, a total of the room, 50 carries, 299 yards, and 2 touchdowns, with the longest run of the day coming from Derrick Henry with 44 yards. That seems miraculously better compared to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had 6 carries for 17 yards. What are we doing? On the receiving side of things, leading the room was, believe it or not, Isaiah Likely with 3 catches and 53 yards. He was targeted 4 times, caught 75% of his balls. Mark Andrews coming up next, 2 carries, 27 yards. Most of these aren't necessarily that impressive, other than the fact that everyone else in the receiving room only caught a max of 4 passes, and they all had above 12 yards. Let me go on to explain. At the bottom of the room, Anthony Miller, 3 catches, 12 yards. Justice Hill, the running back, had 4 catches for 13 yards and a touchdown, believe it or not. Tylan Wallace, number 16, 1 catch, 21 yards, and on 2 targets. Rashad Bateman, 2 receptions on 2 targets, 24 yards, and a touchdown. Nelson Aguilar, 1 catch, 25 yards. And normally I wouldn't go through the entire room, but when the receiving room is that dominant, especially when there was only 175 yards through the air, you got to give credit where credit is due. I was wrong. I said earlier I didn't even know if there was any fumbles in this game. There was one, but it was recovered. It was never lost. So I don't believe there was any turnovers in this game, which made it very interesting. And Pittsburgh actually somehow had a little room to breathe eventually in this game. It was very, very just rush dominant by Baltimore. And something I always say, I think when you have a rushing versus a passing yards stat or a receiving yards stat, I feel like the rushing is more important. Seeing that, in my opinion, when you're running the ball, you actually run for those yards compared to when you're catching the ball. Let's just say you catch the ball 60 yards downfield and you take it 40 more yards to the house. Instead of that being counted as 40 receiving yards, you get the full 100. Do you know what I'm saying? It's less earned, I feel like, for a receiver to get those yards. And that was proven in this game because Derrick Henry absolutely went nuts. Fully deserves MVP votes, in my opinion. I mean, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, fully deserve it. These quarterbacks, I mean, they're good, but unless they're putting up 50-some touchdowns or 4,500 or just 5,000 yards in general, I really don't think they deserve an MVP. But getting off the MVP, let's get back on track. Sorry, I was getting on a rant there. The next playoff game was the Bills and Broncos. And at the very beginning of this game, believe it or not, the Denver Broncos could have easily ran away with it. I'm dead serious when I say that. The Buffalo Bills fans were crapping their jeans when Denver came out on the very first drive. Bo Nix threw a touchdown, and it was really insane. Threw it to his college teammate, Troy Franklin. It was very impressive for the Broncos. Now, I've seen this strategy time and time again. When you're playing a team that is outright better than you on paper in real life, talent-wise, you have to do two things. Number one, get the ball first and go shock them. Go shock the world. Go be like, hey, we're here to play. Go throw everything at your offense at them. So that way they're going, oh crap, now what do we do? And then you have to get the stop on defense. You have to. And then when you do that, you have to go back and do it again. Well, the Broncos completed two of those three things. If they could have went down the field and scored again after the Buffalo Bills punted the ball on their first possession, I am dead serious in saying this, the Broncos could have very well won this game. Like, utterly, actually, they could have came out and been like, you know what, Bills, you suck, you're overhyped, I'm beating you. But that is not at all what happened, seeing that the final score was 31-7, because after the Denver Broncos let the Bills march all over them up and down the field, and the Broncos easily could have came back and won this game, even in the first quarter, when they didn't have the ball. You know what I'm saying? Their defense, I mean, they sacked Allen twice, but I said last week, if they want to beat the Bills, they have to get after Allen. 2 times is not enough. They needed to have at least a minimum of 4 sacks. But let's get into the stats. Denver scoring the first touchdown of the game. They were winning in the first quarter, believe it or not. At halftime, it was still a close game. It was 10-7. And then the Bills pulled it away with scoring 11 in the third quarter and 10 in the fourth quarter with a final score of 31-7. Let's look at some of these stats. Bo Nix, pretty good game for a rookie quarterback, I'd say. We'll get into a game with a better rookie quarterback here in a minute. But he went 13 for 22, 144 yards, and a touchdown, only getting sacked twice. Pretty good. Riley Dixon also had a pass, which was a fake punt. That is what you needed. It was, I think, at the wrong time, and then the Broncos offense couldn't get anything done, and they ended up having the punt on that drive anyways. But, however, rushing-wise, the leader of the room was Bo Nix. I mean, really, you look at this Broncos offense, and one of the major holes is at running back. I'm sorry, Jace McLaughlin, or whatever your name is, 2 carries, -2 yards, and your longest rush was 1 yard is not acceptable. But Bo Nix, 4 carries, 43 yards. His longest rush was 18 yards. I did see that run. It was actually pretty impressive for Bo Nix, but it came late in the fourth quarter. Didn't really matter. They were just trying to get points on the board. And their kicker missed their field goal. But that's beside the point. Javonte Williams, 7 carries, 29 yards. His longest rush of the day was 6. You're not going to get anything done with a rushing attack like that unless you went air raid through the air. The Broncos, however, did not really do that. Cortland Sutton led the room with 5 receptions. Excuse me. 5 receptions, 75 yards. His longest reception was 21, but he was targeted 9 times. He had 4 incomplete passes or drops. I don't really know which one it is. Completely forgot. However, in this game, again, there was no interceptions or fumbles. There was no turnovers in this game. None at all, which is actually quite impressive. Also in the Broncos receiving room, Marvin Mims Jr., 2 catches, 12 yards, targeted 4 times. You got to catch the ball, Denver. You have to catch the ball, especially if you want to beat teams like Kansas City. I know you technically beat them this year, but nobody remembers that game at this point. Not even Chiefs fans remember that game, okay? I'm just letting you know that. But anyways, moving on to the Denver defense. I mean, P.J. Locke, number 6, was a lock on this defense all day. 10 total tackles, 5 solo tackles. Cody Barton coming in next with 8 tackles and 2 solo tackles. DJ Jones, number 93, with 7 tackles, 5 solo, 1 sack, and that was also his TFL of the day. But somebody that was actually on fire for this Broncos defense and had the most pressures all game was Zach Allen, number 99. Big boy, number 99. 5 total tackles, 4 solo tackles, 1 sack, 2 TFLs. This guy was on fire that game. However, enough about the Broncos defense. Even though I love Zach Allen, I am a big Chiefs fan. I don't want to talk about the Broncos anymore. Let's move on to the dominant Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, 20 for 26. I wonder who else went 20 for 26. Actually, believe it or not, this week, it was Russell Wilson. It was 20 for 29, but stats are close enough, and Russell Wilson is not Josh Allen, because Josh Allen was able to do way more than Russell Wilson was this week with 272 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Was only sacked twice. Like I said, that Denver defense needed to put more pressure on Allen, and they were doing decent at getting pressure, just not getting those sacks and forcing a ton of incompletions. Drink break there. James Cook, 23 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown. His longest run of the day was only 19 yards. I mean, that's a lot of yards. But at the same time, Denver, what are we doing? You had one of the best rushing attacks on defense all season long. And you gave up 120 yards on the ground to the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen came out next in the room with 8 carries, 46 yards. His longest rush was 9 yards. Ty Johnson, oh my goodness, Ty Johnson, if he would have got the ball more, this guy would have went nuts. 9 carries, 44 yards. His longest rush was 11 yards. And then Mitch Trubisky, they say had 3 carries, but they were kneel downs, so it doesn't really matter. They get 3 yards, whatever. Anyways, the Buffalo rushing was 44 carries, 210 yards, technically 213 if you don't count the knees, and a touchdown. That's insane, seeing that the Ravens had 299, Buffalo getting 210. These two offenses are flying high, and they are going to be a tough matchup this week. Stick around towards the end of the episode where I will predict the Ravens-Buffalo game. But let's head back into this Buffalo Broncos game. With Buffalo in the receiving core, the leader was none other than Curtis Samuel. 3 receptions, 68 yards, and a touchdown. His longest was 55 yards. And let me tell you, that was a big touchdown right there. Khalil Shakir, I love saying that name, number 10, 6 receptions, 61 yards. He caught all of his balls, as well as Curtis Samuel did as well. Dalton Kincaid was next with 3 receptions, 47 yards. He also caught all of his passes. In fact, the only one that didn't catch all their passes was Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper, which I really thought Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman were going to have a big impact on this game, and boy, was I wrong. Those 2 receivers were at the bottom of the receiving core, but no hit on them. everyone else had a part in this game for Buffalo, and they were just using different pieces around. And honestly, I think it might have been a part of the game plan, just so that way they could prepare for Buffalo and not Buffalo. What was I saying? They could prepare for the Ravens and the Chiefs later on down the road. Sorry, I'm getting thirsty today. Buffalo's defense, Terrell Bernard. I hope I said that right. 6 tackles, 5 solo tackles, 1 TFL. Matt Milano, the linebacker, middle linebacker, I think, for the Buffalo Bills. 5 total tackles, 3 solo tackles, and a sack for the big boy. And our other big standout for this Bills defense was none other than Greg Rousseau. 2 tackles, 2 solo tackles. They were both solo tackles on the edge. And he had 1 sack and 2 TFLs. Both of his plays were TFLs. And it was awesome to see that Bills defense. And, man, it's going to be tough to predict these games coming up. Heading on to the NFC side of things. Oh, boy. We had the Packers versus the Eagles. And let me tell you, the Packers on offense, I feel like somewhat outperformed the Eagles offense. It was the Eagles defense that really kept them in. The Eagles, defense that really kept them in this thing. As well as the Packers defense and special teams did not look the greatest. Let me tell you, both quarterbacks got sacked twice in this game. But let's go over the points first. Packers, 10 points, and Philadelphia with 22. Now, you look at this and say, oh, well, the Eagles had a handle in this game. It was 10-0 at halftime, Eagles. And they scored all 10 of those points in the first quarter. Like, come on, guys. What are we doing? And then, I mean, the Packers' first points on the board were in the third quarter, and they finally got a field goal. But it should have been 10-6 at that point if the Packers wouldn't have missed a field goal. I thought they had a kicker too, Tom Grassi. I'm sorry. But, at the end of the day, Green Bay was in this till the very end. I mean, they were in this game to the end, which is kind of insane to think about because they turned the ball over, oh my gosh, so many times. Jordan Love, I almost said Jared, but Jordan Love went 20 for 33, 212 yards. I mean, he was hucking that ball. He was hucking that football. Granted, they were down most of the game, but he had 3 interceptions, didn't even throw a touchdown for this Green Bay mother-loving Packers team. Next on the rushing side of things, Josh Jacobs. I mean, this guy tried to carry this team offense on his back, and sadly it didn't working out for him. 18 carries, 81 yards, a touchdown. His longest run was probably, in my opinion, the best run of the entire postseason. I don't care what Derrick Henry did. I don't care what Lamar did. This Josh Jacobs run, go back, watch the tapes. He broke 6 tackles on one run, and in my opinion, should have had the freaking fracking touchdown. What are we doing, Green Bay? Like, that was awesome. And the amount of injuries, I'm just going to touch on this real quick before I go to receiving stats. The amount of injuries that Green Bay sustained in this game was just unreal. I mean, it was insane. They had so many players go down with injuries. It was just nasty. But anyways, receiving-wise for Green Bay, 4 receptions, 46 yards, and 4 targets. He caught all of his balls. Josh Jacobs, 3 receptions on 3 targets, 40 yards. There was no passing touchdowns. But then Dontavian Wicks having a decent game. I'm kidding. Horrible game. 2 receptions on 6 targets. I don't know if that was just a thing where Jordan Love kept on throwing the ball away towards Dontavian Wicks, and he was just the scapegoat. But he only had 39 yards anyways, and his longest reception was 29 yards. So, I mean, we'll just see what's going on there. On defense, yeah, I'm going to skip the fumbles section because, oh my gosh. First play of the game, I knew it was going to be an Eagles stomp down when the very first play of the game was a forced fumble. And sadly, it wasn't really a stomp down. I mean, I'm going to go into this later a little bit when I do my predictions, but like the Eagles had the chance to blow this Packers team out by like 50. and they scored 22 points. Now, I don't know if that's just a coaching thing or like what's going on, but we'll get into that later. The Packers only lost one fumble. They recovered 2 fumbles, which is kind of crazy. So they had 4 turnovers on the entire day. Quay Walker on defense, 8 total tackles, 4 solo tackles. Ian McDuffie, 8 total tackles, 2 solo tackles, half a sack. And then my other player of the game that was pretty good for the Packers on defense was Luca Van Ness, as well as Rashawn Gary. Lucas Van Ness, 4 total tackles, 1 solo tackle, and then Rashawn Gary, 3 total tackles, 1 solo tackle, and that was a sack, which was also a TFL. Pretty dang good. This Packers defense really kept the Eagles in this game, I believe, because they were locking down that Eagles offense. Speaking of the Eagles offense, Jalen Hurts. I mean, he looked pretty good for just coming off of concussion protocol. I'll give him that much. But yeah, Jalen Hurts, I mean, putting up a decent game. 13 of 21, 131 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Pretty dang good for this Philadelphia offense, if I do say so myself. Probably one of the bright spots, however, was Saquon Barkley. 25 carries, 119 yards. His longest rush today was 17. Now, this team, I mean, I would say they couldn't get it going on the ground, but that's just not true. Saquon Barkley, at one point, looked like he was going to run over all this Packers team, and it just didn't end up happening. On the receiving side of things, Devontae Smith, 4 catches, 4 targets, caught all of his balls, 55 yards. His longest was 28. Next was Dallas Goedert, 4 receptions, 47 yards, 6 targets, catching 80% with a touchdown there as well. Probably the biggest bummer in this game was A.J. Brown only getting 1 reception for 10 yards. He'll probably be used more in the NFC divisional matchup that's coming up against the Rams this week. We'll get into that later. As for fumbles, Jeremiah Trotter picked up the fumble that was lost by Keyshawn Nixon at the very beginning of the game. All right, but Philadelphia's defense. Reed Blankenship. Goodness, this boy had a game. 11 total tackles, 7 solo tackles. But my pick for player of the game on Philly's defense was Nolan Smith Jr. That guy, who's now number 3, by the way. I completely did not know he changed his name. Sorry, Philly fans. But 8 tackles, 4 solo tackles, 2 sacks, and he had 2 TFLs to go along with it. Now, that's standing on business. Now, these corners, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, these 2 rookie corners, are going insane. All of Quinyon Mitchell's tackles, he had 6, were solo tackles. And, Cooper DeJean, he was just balling out. These guys were forcing incompletions. He's making it hard for Jordan Love out there. And, yeah, it was going kind of crazy. Now, this Philly team, I am a bit concerned about. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But now, we're going to go on to what was probably the best as in terms of watching-wise, because every other one seemed like it was a blowout this week. We traveled for Sunday Night Football, the Buccaneers and the Commanders. And let me tell you, I nailed this prediction. I absolutely hit it on the head with the hammer. I told you last week, if you want to go watch that episode, I highly encourage it. I only got 4 views, which, I don't know, maybe it was just nerves or something, or maybe it's because it's my first episode and I haven't gone out onto the socials yet and said anything. I will be posting this right after I get done with it. I like to post my episodes with hardly any editing. That way you guys get the full scale. That might hurt me in the long run, but really, I'm doing this for fun, and hopefully maybe one day I can get a career out of it, but we'll see. Anyways, back to this. I'm already running in, 35 minutes almost? 30 right now? Anyways, the Buccaneers and the Commanders. This was a really good game between Jaden Daniels and Baker Mayfield. Obviously, one had a better game than the other, and they both had pretty similar numbers when you go break it down and look at it. First off, it's the score. Commanders win this game for the first time since I think it was 2004? The Commanders won a playoff game. Congratulations, Washington. You won a playoff game, and you're getting a new president here in a week or two. That jokes aside. Anyways, this Commanders team won 23-20. Tampa Bay had the early lead with a field goal in the first quarter. The Commanders stormed back, scoring 10 in the second quarter. It was all tied up at 10 at halftime. Then, in the third quarter, you had the Commanders only getting a field goal, and the Bucs getting I think it was a Mike Evans touchdown. It was either there or it was in the second quarter they got it. But then, in the fourth quarter, you had the Commanders getting a touchdown, and then the Bucs getting a field goal, and it all came down to the Commanders converting a couple of fourth downs on the previous drive and the last drive, and then kicking the game-winning field goal with their kicker, which, by the way, guys, I don't know what the heck was going on with that Commanders kicker. I mean, maybe if you're watching this, I don't even know. What's your name? Let me look at that real quick. Zane Gonzalez, that's right, number 47. He went 3 for 3 on the day. Probably the best kicker of the wild card round. Listen here. Buddy, I'm sorry to say. You have no hair. Okay? Why on earth were you brushing your hair 6 different flipping times before the kick? Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe I'm just getting on to you a little too much. But that was kind of interesting. I saw that during the game, and I was like, what is he doing? Just put your helmet on. I mean, maybe it's just because I get bothered at some things like that. Enough about me. Good Lord, I am yapping today. Goodness. All right, for the Commanders, Jaden Daniels went 24 of 35. Very respectable, but even better, 268 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. The man was sacked 1 time. Uno momento. All right, this passing attack from the Commanders was so well underrated this week. Granted, the Bucs did have a little bit of struggling in that secondary, like I tried to say, because, they were 29th in passing defense. So, regardless, I knew the Commanders were going to have a good passing game, but I didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to absolutely light the flip up. I knew they were going to win by 3 because I freaking called it. Anyways, rushing-wise, Jaden Daniels, who would have known, led the room, 13 carries, 36 yards. And you think, man, that kind of looks like the Broncos, except for Austin Eckler also had 8 carries for 27 yards. And they almost rushed for 100 yards on the day. Brian Robinson Jr., 10 carries, 16 yards. His longest run was 5 yards. Now, if you look at this, Marcus Mariota also had 2 yards. I think he came in on a couple quarterback sneaks. Also tried to get the Bucs to go off sides. On the broadcast, they were saying, hey, they got 2 Heisman quarterbacks in at quarterback. Yo, this is so awesome, guys. I've never seen this before. Yeah, it was kind of cool. Was it cool? Yeah. Marcus Mariota is washed? Yeah, true. But we look at this team. As a team, they had 82 rushing yards. Very respectable when you go back and look at the Broncos' total rushing yards when they had 79. I don't know. They just needed to have more passing yards. I'm dead serious. Because, the Commanders put up Jaden Daniels at 268 freaking passing yards. That's just the thing. You're not going to have a rushing attack. Get a passing attack. We all should have learned that from the 2018 Kansas City Chiefs team, if you know what I mean. Legion of Zoom, baby. Here we go. Anyways, enough about the Chiefs. We're not even to them yet. But Washington, they did recover a fumble on defense. But Bobby Wagner, dude, this guy I underestimated. I thought he was going to be a little washed. I knew he had a little bit to him, but 8 total tackles, 5 solo tackles, half a sack, and a fumble recovery on the day. He is the GOAT for this Commanders defense, and he has definitely been a leader in the center at that middle linebacker position for the Commanders. And who knows, he might even stick around for next year. Now, On the offensive side of things for the Bucks, Baker Mayfield, 15 for 18, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good. I'm not going to lie. Baker Mayfield, it wasn't really his fault in this game. Bucky Irving, 17 carries, 77 yards. I mean, the Bucks outrushed the Commanders, but Jaden Daniels almost had 100 more yards passing than Baker Mayfield did, and that's just what it came down to at the end of the day, especially since the Bucks could not convert on third and fourth down really in this game. Tampa Bay Bucks receiving. Mike Evans led the room. Who would have guessed? 7 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. He caught all of his passes. Chase McMillan, the rookie out of Washington. I believe I have that correct. I have his football card around here somewhere. By the way, if you guys want to purchase any football cards, feel free to reach out to me. I am trying to get that business started up. I'm trying to do a lot of things right now. But yeah, we'll see how far that goes. Chase McMillan having a decent game for the Bucks. All right, and then on defense, Antonio Winfield Jr., 8 total tackles, 4 solo tackles. Lavonte David, 8 total tackles and 3 solo tackles, as well as 1 sack. Lavonte David had a good game here for Tampa Bay. And let's move on to what everybody thought was going to be a absolute blowout, and it was just flipped. And I actually kind of called it. I said that the Rams were going to win by 10 points. I can't remember if I said 10 points, but I know I said 10 points, but I can't remember if I said 10 plus. That's what I have written down on my paper. I didn't think it was going to come within 1 score, and I was completely right. The Minnesota Vikings completely crashed and burned during this game, and the Rams, 27 points. So, yeah, nobody scored in the fourth quarter, but the Rams came out hot, 10-0. Then they scored 14 right before halftime. They were leading 24-3, and then they kicked a field goal in the third quarter. The Vikings finally got their touchdown late in the game. All in all, it didn't really matter. They didn't get the 2-point conversion since the 27-9 score. Let's go ahead and look at the stats. I mean, people were saying Sam Darnold is washed. He's a washed boy. But I don't think that's still the case. I mean, did he lay a goose egg in the playoffs? Absolutely, he did. But, I mean, if you look at his stats, he really wasn't all that bad. I mean, I get you throw the ball 40 times in a game, and you only get 25 catches. That's not the greatest, but they were down the whole game. I guess that's maybe why he has half decent to pretty decent stats. He had 25. He went 25 for 40, 245 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. That's not the worst. For some reason, I think most of his some of his passing yards got taken away because the team total passing yards is 163. I don't know what the heck happened there, but definitely one of the biggest differences in this wild card matchup. Sam Darnold got sacked 9 times, and he got sacked 6 times before halftime. Sorry I'm yelling, but good Lord, this Rams defense was freaking fantastic. I mean, you're looking at a Rams defense that was 22nd in rushing and 20th in passing. They were very middle of the pack this year, and yet they came out and they looked like a top 3 defense in the freaking NFL. Enough about their defense. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Minnesota's rushing attack, Aaron Jones, 13 carries for 48 yards. Cam Akers, 5 carries for 39 yards. And Sam Darnold, I mean, he put up 19 yards rushing as well. I mean, Sam Darnold, really, his stats don't look that bad. They don't make it look like he played bad. But whatever. Bad decisions, holding on to the ball too long. There's no reason you should be getting sacked 9 times in a game unless you had freaking Derek Thomas, Chiefs legend, on your defensive line. Or Aaron Donald, which the Rams do not have for any of you living under a rock. TJ Hockenson led the room with 5 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. On 5 targets, he caught all of his balls. Justin Jefferson, up next, went 5 for 8, 58 yards. His longest reception was 22 22 yards, excuse me. And by the way, TJ Hawkinson, I mean, that touchdown catch and run was very, very good. The tight ends were freaking on fire this game, but we'll move on. Another thing that was kind of crazy is the Vikings lost some fumbles, which is pretty bad. Pretty bad. On defense, Blake Cashman led the room with 11 tackles, 5 solo tackles, and a sack. Pretty dang good. But the next guy, Ivan Pace Jr., 10 tackles, 7 solo tackles, and 2 TFLs. I mean, this Minnesota defense wasn't bad. They were just getting lit up by the offense of the Rams. But before I move on to that, the next guy I think probably balled out the best was Andrew Van Ginkel. 3 total tackles with a sack and a TFL on the same play. Pretty good, but somebody who I was actually kind of surprised had stats, which I didn't really think about this. Jordan Addison had a tackle. And I think it was because it was an interception, but I haven't seen that. Dallas Turner had the same amount of tackles as Jordan Addison in this game. But we'll move on to the Rams. Now, the Rams offense. Matthew Stafford doing Matthew Stafford kind of things. 19 for 27 on the catch and attempt ratio. That's pretty dang good, especially since he had 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. Was only sacked twice. Kyren Williams, 16 carries, 76 yards. His longest rush of the day was 17 yards. Now, we also had Ronnie Rivers get a couple carries. But on the receiving side of things, Tyler Higbee, and my last name's Higbee, so of course I was going nuts for this guy. In the first quarter, by the way, 5 receptions, 58 yards on 5 targets. His longest catch was 23 yards, and then he got injured, had to get sent to the hospital. At the time of this recording, we don't have much to go off of other than Schefter thinks he's going to be fine, in quotations. Anyways, on defense, Jared Verse had a fumble recovery, and he is my favorite guy of the day, even though he only had 2 tackles and a fumble recovery, but the fumble recovery was huge for this team. Other guys that balled the freak out, we had Quentin Lake, 9 tackles, 6 solo tackles, a TFL, and then Cameron Kitchens, who would have thought? I love Cameron Kitchens. 6 tackles, 4 solo tackles, but then we had Neville Gilmore and Brian Young both sharing 1.5 sacks, 5 and 4 tackles respectively. I mean, another guy that absolutely showed up and showed out and got sacks was Kobe Turner, Mr. Number 91, 4 total tackles, 2 solo tackles, and 2 mother-loving sacks. You gotta love that. Out of this Rams defense, 9 total sacks is ridiculous. And Kobe Durant with that interception. Enough about the Rams. I am currently only through my first segment of this podcast, and I'm already longer than last week's episode, but I would appreciate it if you kept on listening. We've got a lot more to go through. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, I will be predicting the Bills-Ravens game at the end of this episode. Stick around for that. Next, we're moving on to the power rankings. I'm going to try and keep this short. The power rankings for this week, we only have 8 teams left in the NFL. And I really do think that a couple of you might be going, that's not what I thought, or that's not right. But, in my opinion, this is what I've got going for us. At number 8, I've got none other than the Washington Commanders. Hear me out. They had a really, really good game against Tampa Bay. 12-win team or not, this team is led by a rookie quarterback, even though he showed up and showed the flip out with his 268 passing yards against the Bucs. He tore apart that defense, even though at times he couldn't get things going. The Commanders' offense was fine. Their defense was great. And I just really do think that the Commanders are still not the worst team in the playoffs, but they're just 8th in the power rankings. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, the Commanders, they got a tough matchup coming up this week against the Lions. And I don't know, man. I can't rule out the Lions. Anyways, Commanders at number 8. You've had a really successful season, and we'll see what goes on here. We'll see what goes on from here. At number 7, we got the on fire. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Los Angeles Rams. I mean, you could say they're on fire. That would be horrible. A horrible joke. What's going on over there in LA is not good. At the time of this recording, it's still going on. I am so very sorry for all those families over there. And my joke, well, I couldn't resist. But the Rams, I mean, fantastic game against Minnesota. They had a middle of the pack defense and made it look top 5. Jaden Verse and all these other players are coming out, showing up, showing out. And really, I have them going 7th. I mean, they play the Eagles this week. I mean, but this offense was actually pretty nasty. And we'll get on to that later, but at number 7, I have the Rams. And Los Angeles, who knows? Could be an upset in your future. At number 6, I have something that might shock. The Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I have a reason for this. Don't shoot me down yet, okay? The Eagles I have at number 6, and which, yes, that means I have the Texans above them somewhere. I'm not telling you where. But the Eagles, I mean, their offense was not pulling things together. Their defense was doing their job. But, I mean, they have a game against the Rams this week. We'll see how that goes. But, yeah, I have the Eagles at 6th. I mean, they're supposed to have one of the best, if not the best, defense in the NFL. And, I mean, they were doing their job, but other than Saquon Barkley on that offense, they really couldn't get much going. So, I mean, I have my reasons, but Eagles, you're at 6 this week. And last week, I believe, if I look at my notes here, I had you at number 4. So I had you dropping 2 spots. But you still got the dub. You're playing for a divisional round playoff spot, and we'll see what happens. Number 5, I have the Houston Texans. Now, this team has to play the Chiefs this week. Oh, boy. But, I mean, they played out of their ever-loving minds against the Chargers. I mean, nobody really expected the Chargers to be a first-round exit other than the Chargers chargered it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they freaking chargered it. But the reason I have the Texans above the Eagles, the Texans' offense showed up and showed out, and their defense showed up and showed out. The Eagles' offense really didn't, even though they now have the number 1 selling book in the nation on Amazon, which I'm not going to lie, I bought a copy. Thank you, A.J. Brown. But the Texans, number 5, I feel like they should move up this week. And they played a lot better than the Eagles did, in my opinion. Now, obviously, they're 2 completely different teams. And talent-wise, they're completely different. But I just have the Texans above the Eagles this week. At number 4, we have, who would have guessed, the Baltimore Ravens. I have the Ravens just above just behind the Bills. I have the Bills at 3, spoiler alert. But the Ravens, I mean, they just, oh my gosh, they put up so many rushing yards against the freaking fracking Pittsburgh Steelers, who did not deserve to be in the playoffs. The Bengals deserved it more than they did. I'm just kidding, Cincinnati. You suck, and I hope you know that. But anyways, I'm sorry. I'm getting in the mic. Disclaimer there. The Ravens, really, really freaking good football team. Their defense kind of struggled a little bit, and that is one reason I put them at 4 rather than 3. I was thinking about this for a while. I was thinking about putting the Bills at number 4 and Ravens 3, but I decided not to do that just based off of defensive performance. And at number 3, I have the Buffalo Bills. Now, they had 31 unanswered points against the Broncos this week. Really no surprise here putting them at 3. I really do think they're going to do well against the Ravens this week. And goodness, just stick in on this episode, guys, because at the end, I will be predicting the Ravens-Bills game. And it's a tight one, guys. It's going to be tough. At number 2, we're going to skip the Bills. Or did we skip the Bills? I don't really know. At number 2, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Really kind of the same thing last week. I mean, they got everything coming together at the right time. They got people coming off of injury. This week, Andy Reid came out and had his press conference and said everybody, literally everyone in the organization, other than Rashid Rice, or any others that were on season-ending IR, were on practice this week, full practice. And that is actually a really good sign. And you better watch out, guys, because this Chiefs team are getting hot at the right time. And at number one, no shocker, I still have the Detroit Lions. I mean, they got a good game this week against the Commanders. We'll see what happens. Jaden Daniels is looking pretty good. And, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about the Lions. If you want to hear more about the Lions and Chiefs, go listen to last week's episode. There's a lot of good things in that episode. The music might be kind of obnoxious. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and fix that. And hopefully the music isn't that bad right now. So, anyways, enough about me. So the recap at the power rankings, I got 1 Lions, 2 Chiefs, 3 Bills, 4 Ravens, 5 Texans, 6 Eagles, shocker, 7 Rams, and 8 Commanders. And that's it for my power rankings this week. And we're going to see what's going on next. Don't forget, stick around, because next I'm going to be predicting these division round matchups. But first, we're going to go over some coaching changes that happened here recently in the NFL. We're going to start with the firings. The Atlanta Falcons fired their defensive coordinator and their D-lines coach. Their defensive coordinator, Jimmy Lake, obviously was not giving very good this year. And, yeah, they also fired their D-lines coach kind of out of nowhere. But who would have expected that? Because the Atlanta Falcons D-line is not great. Carolina Panthers fired their safeties coach, their outside linebackers coach, and their quarterback coach. So, I mean, nothing huge going on in Carolina. Looks like they're going to keep their head coach and their GM around. So, we'll see. Also, their defensive coordinator is also staying there in Carolina. The Bears fired their head coach midseason, Matt Eberflus, with the timeouts. I guess he thought he could sell him on the black market or something. Like, buddy, go get a high school job. Anyways, don't come coach my high school team. I got a great coach. Go coach West Franklin. Sorry, West Franklin fans, if you're listening to this. I just want to continue having a good high school career. So, we'll see. Sorry for catching a stray there. But anyways, Chicago Bears fired their head coach. Not a good shock. Not a bad shock there. Cincinnati Bengals fired their defensive coordinator, their linebacker coach, their D-line coach, and their O-line coach. Good Lord, they have almost cleared house on half of that offensive staff. And, yeah, or defensive staff. And, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Lou Anarumo, I'm sorry, sir, you are not getting it done for the Bengals. They had one of the worst defenses in the NFL and one of the best offenses in the NFL. That is pretty dang bad. You've been there since 2019. Your defense hasn't been all that great, but good Lord, you could have at least made it half decent for the Bengals to make it a decent way into the playoffs. Matter of fact, it was not the Chiefs' fault that the Bengals didn't make the playoffs. I firmly believe this, guys. If you don't make the playoffs, it's your own dang fault. Every single year, you have the chance as an NFL team to go out and control your own destiny. And if it comes down to some other team to win it for you in the end, at the end of the year, that's your fault. Okay? That is your fault. I'm just being real here. That's your fault as an NFL organization, and you failed. Like, I'm dead serious. I love NFL teams. I love the NFL. I love these coaches and players as much as everyone else. But if you leave it up to another team for you to get into the playoffs at the end of the year, it's your own dang fault. And I really think the Commanders took control of that this year and were saying, hey, we have a chance. We control our own destiny. Let's get to the freaking fracking playoffs. And that's exactly what Jaden Daniels led them to do. Now, Cincinnati Bengals couldn't get it done. They just could not get it done. I mean, you have a chance to get to the playoffs every single year. Same with the Jets. You control your own freaking destiny. Everybody can do it. Everybody's got equal talent in the NFL. Well, that's a lie, but everybody's got talent. You just got to know how to use your players right and use that talent right. And I'm not trying to be a wise guy or anything, but every team has their own opportunities and their own destinies. And if it comes down to someone else trying to get you into the playoffs, you failed as an organization. Enough about the Bengals. I really do think they're a good team. I don't want to catch strays as being a Chiefs fan. Bengals fans, I love you, even though you might hate me. But let's move on. The Cleveland Browns fired their offensive coordinator on the hour mark here, and their O-line coach. Ken Dorsey was not a great fit for that Cleveland Browns offense. Dallas Cowboys didn't necessarily fire Mike McCarthy. They just said, nah, we are not extending you. Get the flip out the building. That's pretty much what they did. I could just picture this in my mind. Mike McCarthy going, hey, is there any chance I can get an extension? And then just the line going dead. Like, they just, nothing. And then later on it said, yeah, they're not hiring Mike McCarthy. And Mike McCarthy didn't actually get told by Jerry Jones. That's just what I have in my mind. That's just something funny. Indianapolis Colts, fired their defensive coordinator. Thank the Lord. The Colts will actually have a decent defense next year, guaranteed. You heard it here first. Gus Bradley, he gone out the door, and Jacksonville Jaguars. Who would have thought, right? I mean, it's such a shocker. Doug Peterson, thank you for your service. Get out the freaking front door. You've been fired. The head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars is going to be needing replaced. The Raiders also fired Antonio Pierce, their head coach. Miami Dolphins fired their special teams coordinator, which, I mean, go ahead. Danny Crossman, apparently, you're garbage. Not as a person, but as a special teams coordinator, according to the Miami Dolphins. And they also fired their wide receiver coach, seeing that Tyreek Hill only had 900 receiving yards this year. Like, are we insane? You should fire your quarterback coach, especially for letting Tua Tagovailoa try and make tackles with his head this season. Anyways, enough on my rant. New England Patriots also fired their head coach with Jerod Mayo. I really do think, even though Jerod Mayo had some questionable things he said to the media this year, like, come on, dude. Give the man a chance to do something with this team. I guess that you have more opportunities with your new head coaching hire, which we'll get to that in a second, but whatever. New Orleans Saints, I didn't know this. They fired Dennis Allen this past week. And the New York Jets, mid-season, they fired their head coach, and they also fired their GM. Thank goodness, because we don't need 14, 15, and 17-year-olds like myself telling what these teams, what they need to be doing. I mean, I obviously have an opinion, and I'm going to state it, by golly, but, good Lord, you can give good advice, but if you're using freaking Madden for advice, even if it's just a doubt, like a little seed in your mind, oh, that guy's awareness is too low, get out. Just leave. Madden is a dumpster fire anyways. EA, if you're listening to this, which I know you're not, because I don't know how you would be, but I hope you are, because if you are, I'd like you to leave me a following, and if you can give me 5 stars, that's awesome, and I'll say Madden's amazing. But anyways, the Jets fire their head coach and their GM. And then San Francisco 49ers fired their defensive coordinator and their special teams coordinator. Finally, Brian Schneider can go find somebody else to mess with. Hey, the Browns are looking for somebody. Why don't you go there? Seattle Seahawks fired their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, and the Tennessee Titans fired their GM. Honestly, they should have fired their head coach and hired Mike Vrabel back, but sadly not. As we move on to the hirings, Mike Vrabel hired for the New England Patriots head coach position. He won 3 Super Bowls with the head coach. He won 3 Super Bowls with the head coach of Bill Belichick back in the 2000s. This man, 2010, whatever, assistant role, whatever. Anyways, he won Super Bowls with this Patriots team, and I do think he's going to be a good fit. So we'll see about that. Now, other hirings, the Cleveland Browns have already filled their offensive coordinator position and their O-line position at offensive coordinator. They actually promoted Tommy Reeves, not Reeves, I'm sorry if I got that name wrong. And that O-line coach, I think they got somebody from Alabama, if that's correct, or maybe that was no, that was Tommy Rees. Okay, so Bloomgren. Mike Bloomgren. Uh, I hear he's a pretty decent offensive line coach, so I mean we'll see there. And then, of course, the last hiring so far, as I'm recording this video, San Francisco 49ers fill their offensive coordinating spot with Clay Kubiak. I don't know if I said that right or not, but I mean that's a pretty good guess, right? I mean, like who can blame me? Uh, hopefully, maybe they can convince this guy. Hey, can you make it to where our offensive players aren't getting injured all the time? Maybe make Christian McCaffrey into a top 5 back again. Yeah, probably not going to happen, but I mean, we can expect the best. And possible coaches, something that's been circulating the media in the last 24 hours, like none other, has been Deion Sanders has been in contact with the Dallas Cowboys. I think that'd be a fantastic fit for the Cowboys, even though in the past, Deion Sanders has been saying like things like, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stay here in Buffalo. I don't think that's going to happen. If Shedeur Sanders goes to the NFL and goes to play for the Cowboys, he's going with them. That's just what I think. But anywho, enough about coaches, enough about all of this. We're back down to the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you've all been waiting for. Can you hear me right now? Because we are predicting the divisional round of the playoffs. But first, before we get to that, I gotta set up the matchups for you. We got on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN and ABC, we got the Texans traveling to Kansas City to Arrowhead Stadium, face on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, hear me out, guys. This is gonna be a close game. But on Saturday at 7 p.m. on Fox, we got the Commanders traveling to Detroit. Good Lord, loud rack. What am I saying? Good Lord, ruckusful, noisy, absolutely loud Detroit. Face on the Detroit Lions at 7 p.m. I already said this, but on Fox. Then on Sunday, to kick things off at 2 p.m., we got the Rams traveling to Philadelphia. Never want to go there in my life. I mean, I love Philly fans, but I don't know if they'll love me. Who knows? I mean, I love Jason Kelce. Guys, please give me a pass. Like, come on, guys. I love the Eagles. But like, come on. I don't want to be unalived in Philly. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, that game's at 2 p.m. on NBC and Peacock. And to end, what am I saying? And to end things out, we got the Ravens traveling to Buffalo for the heavy matchup against the Bills at 5:30 p.m. on CBS and Paramount Plus. I gotta say that like the CBS guys. But anyways, these are some really good matchups here in the divisional round. I got all of them right except for one, so take it as you will. Let's see. The one I got wrong was the Texans, and I don't think I'm going to get this one wrong. But to start out my predictions, I have the Chiefs beating the Texans. Come on, guys. Bite me. The Chiefs team is too good. Their offense and defense, too good. The Texans, they're going to keep it close. I know they will, but they played a couple weeks ago, and the Chiefs, they played pretty dang well against this Texans team. And the Texans, they finished out the regular season. Pretty dang decent, right? Like, you got to give props to them. So, if I can find this here and I can stop yapping about what I'm talking about here. Yeah, so they played the Chiefs in week, what was it? 16, yeah, and they lost 27-19. This Chiefs team in that game, I'm just going to give you a couple of stats. Patrick Mahomes went 28 for 41, 260 yards, a touchdown. CJ Stroud went 23 of 39, 244, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions is what pretty much separated the Texans and Chiefs in this game. Joe Mixon, 14 carries, 57 yards. Kareem Hunt, 11 carries, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Tank Dell, which they do not have anymore. I am so very sorry. That man might not set foot on a football field ever again. I hope that's not the case, but I mean, who knows? It's the NFL, it's the world we live in, and sometimes it's just not fair. But he had 6 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown in his season finale of this game. I mean, he was having a breakout game, and Tank Dell was going nuts. And Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs, 7 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, this game really did come down to the wire. The Chiefs had the possession. That's been one of the biggest things every single game that the Chiefs have won this year. I say won because when they lost to Buffalo, they didn't do this, but they have the time of possession. And I really do think the Chiefs team can run the ball and take the time of possession. Also, they're undefeated at home this year, and the Texans are 4-4 when playing away games. So, I mean, we'll see. Technically, they're 5-4 because they did beat the Chargers, and it was, no, I was actually at home. It was at home. So yeah, the Texans 4-4 in away games. Chiefs had 33 minutes of possession compared to the Texans' 26 minutes. Chiefs had more total yards on offense. They had 0 turnovers, and they had more first downs. So, just looking at the top of this thing, I do think the Chiefs get another win here as the Texans, I mean, you had a really good season. I do think you're going to put up a great fight here against the Chiefs. But, yeah, I got the Chiefs winning this one by a touchdown. I'll say they win by a touchdown or a field goal. One of the two. Probably, I hope it's a little bit more than that, but we'll just see. Saturday night, we got the Commanders versus the Lions, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. I got the Lions winning. I mean the spread. Keep in mind the spread for the Chiefs game. The Chiefs are favored by 8. The Lions are favored by the most this week, 9.5. I get that the Commanders are 12-5, but I mean, ESPN Analytics says the Commanders have a 27% chance to win this game. They're saying they're completely off-matched in the Lions. I don't think so. I think this Commanders defense can play better than they are. I also think that this offense has a lot of hype, especially around Jay Daniels. I mean, they took down the Eagles earlier this year, but according to last week, that might not have been as an impressive stat as we thought. But, I mean, Jared Goff, I mean, this Lions team, I'm going to go to the grave saying this. The Lions cannot be beat by an NFC team until I see it actually happen. I don't think that the Lions or the Chiefs are losing this week. They both came off of byes. They've both needed byes. They've both had players getting injured. The Lions are getting a couple players back this week. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. The Lions are 7-2 at home. Commanders are they have a winning record on away games, 5-3. They had a couple of games coming out of the wire in away games, and we'll see what goes on. But I have the Lions winning this one by 2 touchdowns, guys. I really do. Then Sunday afternoon, we have the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Philly to take on the Eagles. And like I said, this Eagles team is scary. They're favored by 6 on the spread and on betting odds. Over-unders 43.5, which, by the way, that Lions game, the over-under is 51.5. I wouldn't bet on that game. Holy cow. Anyways, I mean, this team, the Rams, just came off of a big win. I mean, they're really good. This Eagles offense is really freaking amazing. Saquon Barkley rushed for over 2,000 yards this season. I mean, they're going nuts. The Eagles came off of a blowout win, I would say, but they only won by 12. And that's where I think I'm going to have a big upset this week. Because I'm going to have the Rams beating the Eagles. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to have them beating by a touchdown. The Rams' offense and defense looked a ton better this week than the Eagles' defense. No, Eagles' offense, excuse me. Their defense was insane. But Eagles' offense, unless they can get it together, and Saquon probably has a 150-yard game, if not a 175-yard game, and Jalen Hurts can actually throw for more than 170 passing yards, I really think that's the only way they beat the Rams. I mean, the Rams, I said, if they can get it together, they can play really, really good against these playoff teams, and they can hang 50 on you. I mean, just watch out. Any game, they can put 40. They can put a 40 bomb on you even. But I really do think that the Eagles are going to lose at home. even though they do have an 8-1 record, the Rams have a winning away record. We'll see how that looks and how it pans out. I will be watching this game. It is on NBC. It's going to be a good game. But I have the Rams winning by a touchdown. And you heard it here first, guys. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. We have the Ravens traveling to Buffalo. And I've been saying this the whole episode. Dude, this game is going to be freaking tough to predict. I mean, I just don't know. It's going to come down to really one thing, in my opinion. It's going to be at 5:30 on CBS. This game's going to be a banger. It's going to come down to the wire. But the one thing that separates the Bills and the Ravens, can this Ravens defense stop Josh Allen? And I mean, they played earlier this year, right? Like, I think they did. I think the Bills and Ravens played earlier this year. Yeah, no, I was right. They played in week, what was it, 4? Yeah, they played in week 4. And the Ravens, I mean, they ran all over the Bills. I mean, Derrick Henry, 24 carries, 199 yards, and a touchdown is nothing to sneeze at. But, I mean, this Bills team has came a long ways from this loss. And the Ravens have gotten even better than last time. I mean, the really big thing was Ravens ran the ball more. They have Derrick Henry. They had 31 minutes of possession compared to the Bills' 28. They both had a turnover. The Ravens had double the more first downs and double the more total offensive yards. And they utterly destroyed the Bills. But I think it's going to be the opposite. It's tough to beat a team twice. Ask my Chiefs. We know. Even though we are going to beat the Texans twice. The Bills. I have the Buffalo Bills winning this game against the Baltimore Ravens by 10, actually, believe it or not. It could come down to a field goal, or it's going to be 10. There's going to be a touchdown difference in between there somewhere. I just don't think that this Ravens defense has what it takes late in the year to beat this Bills offense. And, I mean, honestly, this game really is a coin flip. But, actually, the actual odds for a coin flip are 51%. It lands 51% of the time that you flipped it on. Like, the side that was on your thumb. But, I think the Bills are that 51% team this week. And we'll just see. But, baby, oh, baby. This is my longest episode yet, even though it's my second episode. Like, what am I saying, dude? Like, what? I'm sitting here on this desk, recording this episode. And a lot of you probably have already left if you've even listened to this episode. I appreciate it if you are. Go ahead and drop a like and a follow. Well, this will be on YouTube as well, I believe. HiYouTube.com. But anyways, really, to recap, we got Chiefs-Texans. I got the Chiefs beating the Texans. We got Commanders-Lions. I got the Lions beating the Commanders. Then on Sunday, we got Rams-Eagles. I have the Rams pulling up the upset against the Eagles and moving on to the NFC Championship game. And then I have the Ravens at the Bills, and I have the Bills winning that. And just to give you a heads up, because I know I'm going to be right, or at least I hope I am, we have our championship weekend results, and that will be Bills traveling to Kansas City, take on the Chiefs for the AFC Championship game, and the Rams traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions in the ultimate Matthew Stafford versus Jared Goff game. We've had it a couple times here in the last couple years, but this one's the icing on the cake. NFC Championship game, and that'll set up for next week's episode. I appreciate you guys coming in and listening for your time, whether you're working outside or sitting at home, listening to my podcast, or even on the job. I appreciate you giving me your time and listening to my podcast. And with that, second episode of the Tackle Tack Network. The Tackle Talk Network, excuse me, is up and going, and I'll see you next week.